it's Linda from Lányos Handmade, and today we are going to make the Kata Bag. I've got a couple here to show you. I had a third one, but somebody snatched that up really quickly. This one is vinyl, and this one is cork. I'll put the links below for where I got the materials from and the hardware. But the one thing I was going to mention now before we start is I have chapters because it's a long video, so there are chapters in there. So you can always bounce forward to the part that you'd like to see specifically, and then you won't have to watch the whole video if you don't want to. So back to business here. So what are the features of the Kata Bag? Well, first of all, it's got this pocket on the front, little pouch. Actually, that's pretty big. And it's got the little zipper pocket here. And then it's got the hidden slip pocket. And inside we have, on this one, a slip pocket and another zipper pocket. And of course on the back, there's another zipper pocket too. This one's a bit different. This one has a purse lock on it. It has the little zipper pocket, and it has the pouch pocket here, and the slip pocket. And inside is where it's changed, because on this one I put 2 zipper pockets, and on the back there's another zipper pocket. I lost count. I don't know how many that was. So you can do 2 zipper pockets, a zipper pocket and a slip pocket, or both slip pockets. It's your choice. You put in what you want to put in. The one thing I did want to mention to you about this is make sure you use materials that are good for your machine. Test things out, okay, before you start your actual sewing. This is 2 layers of cork, and it did pleat very nicely, okay? This is a layer of vinyl that was kind of squishy and thin, so it deceived me. I thought I could sew. But when I put the 2 layers together, I couldn't get the folds to sit flat. So it was good to test it. So I used the lining on the inside to make the inside of the pocket, this stuff, so that it's a bit lighter to sew. So make sure you know, before you commit, check out to see if you can sew pleats into the 2 layers that you're going to have. The other part is for the strap anchors. You want to make sure that they're strong, but they're also not, you know, too thick for you to get your sewing machine through. So some people did, this is just 1 strap anchor folded over. Some people did 2 strap anchors and sandwiched some heavyweight interfacing in between them, and then sewed them and then put them on. So that's an option too, but it all depends on your machine. I took the simple way out, and all I did was use 1 layer of the cork and 1 layer of heavy duty interfacing, and I just glued it all together. So keep that in mind when you're doing it too. All right, I've got my pieces to make my pleated pocket on the front. I have a little bit of difficulty here drawing center marks and things on here, so I've drawn some on the back because this is very, very velvety vinyl. So first of all, we have to place this on here lined up properly with some double-sided tape so we can sew it down. Now, as I said, I'm going to have a little bit of trouble lining it up here. But once I get it stuck on with double-sided tape, I'm going to double check it, because we're going to sew around the outside edge of this. So I got to get my double-sided tape and stick that down. I have here a Wizard of Oz Dorothy shoes. I never even realized they were double-sided. I don't know how long I've had this, and I never realized they were double-sided, but they're very pretty. And I've got some Led Zeppelin zipper tape here, except it's got writing on it, so I'm thinking I should probably try and stick the writing the right way up. I'll try and make sure the writing is on the right side on the Led Zeppelin part. Okay, so I will put some zipper stops at the end here so the zipper doesn't fall off again. Just real tight zigzags here just to hold it down. We're going to have some Dorothy Whimsy with some Led Zeppelin. I think that's cool, don't you? So I'm just going to sew that and stick this on with double-sided tape and sew the outside edge down. Okay, I've got my zipper overlay on, and we'll cut this out after when we reach it in the pattern so I don't lose track. But right now we're going to line this up here. This is right side up, and the pocket itself is right side up too. And we're just going to sew it along the top here. Then after that, we can fold this up. Press it a little bit with my fingers. I can go get my iron too and press it. And the next one that we're sticking on is this one. And we want to stick it on this way. So we're going to have the right sides of our pocket together, but the wrong side of the zipper. And this is the right side of the zipper and the wrong sides of the pockets. So I will sew this one, and then we can move on to the next step. So now that we've got the zipper sewn on both sides, I'm just going to go press it a little bit, keep it nice and flat. And then I'm just going to edge stitch right down here so it stays flat too. Now it might not be easy for you to press your materials or edge stitch them, but if you can, it makes it look nice. It helps when you're sewing your zipper in. I have to cut out my little zipper box here, and I'm going to go just a little bit past here so that none of the edges show. But be careful doing it. You don't want to mess it up now. So take your time with it. You don't want to cut your black zipper overlay, but you don't want any of the red showing here neither. And I think I did it okay. That's just me being a fusspot, I think. Now we're going to put this centered nicely on top of here. So make sure your centers match up. Oh, I do have them on here, right? Amazing. And your zipper is exactly inside the box. Where's my zipper? Right there. I'm going to pull through here too. Well, that's going to look really cute. I'm going to use double-sided tape to hold this down. And I'm just going to sew inside the box now. And I have to go slowly because everything I'm using is a little bit stretchy. It's very easy to sew, but it's lightweight. So I'm just going to sew inside around the box. Okay, I've sewed around the inside now. So since the inside and the outside are both sewn, this is on here really good. And now I just flip it over and I line up. You notice this 1 inch here has to be cut off. I'll get some pins here and secure it so that I can sew around. And we're going to cut only the one piece here so that these two are even. And then I'm going to sew around. And when I sew around, it's going to be a little tricky here. Put it this way down on the machine and sew that way, and then that way, and up here, and that will seal up the inside of the zipper. And this piece will be finished. Here's our back piece, and these two will sit together. Now I'm going to edge stitch around to finish this off, and notice how stretchy it is too. So I'll use some double-sided tape to make sure it stays really well. And then we'll have a proper pocket, but we'll also have a nice pocket lining on this side. Now, some people, this material is stretchy, so it might stretch when I'm sewing, or it might stretch when I'm cutting. So I am going to pay attention to if one piece is bigger than the other, because these pieces both have to be the same size. You see there's a little bit of bumpiness in here that makes this piece shorter. So I'm just going to trim off that before I sew around, and that'll make that piece finished. So let's seal this up and then put these two pieces together. Okay, I've sewed up my little pocket. And before we get too carried away, I mean, don't sew these together yet. Let's stick our markings for our snap on here. So I went up the measured distance it says in the pattern, and I put 2 little holes for my prongs, here and here. And I'm going to poke through. Oh, that's a stubborn one. And we poke through this way so that we can put the flap on top and have the snap meet the flap. Let's put this on. And our washer too. And just a little bit of tape so it's not rubbing against anything. Now we can sew these two pieces together with an edge stitch. Now that looks pretty even across there. I'm just going to take it to my cutting table and measure it one more time and take off the excess, straighten it out, just in case I pulled it too much one way or the other. And then I'll just edge stitch around and this piece will be finished off. All right, we've got this finished. I edge stitched all around and we've got a nice little pocket in it. This one's going to be quite lightweight for doing the folding, so I shouldn't have too much problem, but you never know, because look at the size of that. If your materials are too heavy, keep in mind you can always use some, yeah, this is a bit rubbery in here. You can always use lining, like this is waterproof canvas. And you could always use a piece of lining inside instead of the real material here. So this is finished. I'm going to put it aside. And now I do my flap. I put a bit of interfacing on this just so I can sew it. And these layers are going to be good. But first of all, I've got to measure where I'm going to put my magnetic snap, because we're going to stick this magnetic snap through here. Got to find another piece of backing interfacing for this little snap. And I think I'm going to, after I'm finished, going to slide some more heavyweight interfacing in here, because this is really flimsy. Can you see how, you know, just not much body to it? So I'm going to get my materials and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, my markings are on. Let's poke these through. Okay, I've got my holes punched in here. This is the nice outside, so we're not going to touch it. I've got a hole punched in here. So let's put our little snap through. Okay, this is done. And it's going to meet up with this when we finish. For now, let's just make this. Put right sides together and we'll clip it together. And I'm going to sew it around here, turn it, stuff it with something heavy like this, and then sew the top. Okay, I sewed around. I went off track here, so I actually measured and drew where I was supposed to sew. So if you're ever having trouble keeping track of your seam allowances, just draw them in. Nobody's going to see it on the other side anyway. I did my clips so that I can turn it easily. Let's see if this fits. Nope, bit too big. Let's make it a little bit smaller. And when you put something like this in, make sure you're consistent and keep the seam allowances on the same side, like either the inside or the outside, because that bumpy edge, see around this curve here, it's in the wrong spot. That bumpy edge is going to make it kind of weird to sit nicely. Yeah, it's there now. So now on this side, there's absolutely no seam allowances. And what I can do is sew the top shut and everything will stay nicely. And you can edge stitch around if you like, or if it's a funny material, you know, maybe you don't want to edge stitch, you don't have to if it lies flat nicely. All right, I sewed the top closed so I think it was Peltex that I used, doesn't fall out. And I also did top stitch around. I tested it up here first because this is not shown when the bag's finished, right? And I just wanted to see if I could sew through the layers okay, and I could. And the other thing that helped is I've got this weird little foot where this part is higher than this part. So when you drive it across the edge here, this one's on the machine and this one's higher up on your thick materials. So that kind of helped too to hold it. And I went really slow and it's okay. I'm happy with the way it turned out. So that goes on top of here. And this goes on top of our slip pocket that is on the front of the bag. Except first we have to pleat this. And then put it on so that it sits nicely. Okay, I did another one with the lining on the back to show you how much lighter it is. And like I say, this has to be folded later on. I'm just going to show you here right now. But if we put this on here, then our layers aren't as fat. We still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers, but my machine can sew through these layers no problem at all. Now, I did use cork for one of these, and I had absolutely no problem with the cork, having 7 layers of the cork. I think it's just a bit more squishy, that I can squish it down with my sewing. But with this vinyl and this one, it ended up being a bit too much. So I know I can get through this and sew this onto my slip pocket. But I wasn't too sure if I could do the other one. So keep in mind, you can use lining on this side. Now I drew lines on here and I probably can't see them. Oh, that's the line I drew on the bottom. And oh, there's the line I drew on the top. So I have to line it up here and just a bit up here, line it up there. And all we're going to do is sew down this side. And then we go to the other side and we line it up on our bottom marking there. We line it up on our side marking. And all we're going to do is sew down this side. So these two sides are going to be sewed down somewhere. Can't see my lines. To hold. And it's going to look pretty silly. And don't forget, you can use a strip of double-sided tape along here. But remember, this is going to be your stitching line. So I don't know if you want to sew on top of your double-sided tape. But I've got this placed on here. And I guess I could always sew twice. you know, maybe once on each side of the double-sided tape if you're afraid of having it mess up your machine. I don't usually have a problem with this brand, so I am going to just sew from the top to the bottom and not worry where my double-sided tape is. Okay, I've got this side sewn, and I did these goofy little triangles on the side because I don't like just having, you know, the seam here only. It's going to rip out sooner or later. So I did a goofy little triangle, and when we pleat it, it's mostly going to be covered up anyway. Now on this side, I've got clips and I've measured it out, and I just have to sew that side too. Okay, I've got both edges sewn on. You can't see from this side because it's black, but that's sewn down and that's sewn down here. Now all we have to do is sew across the bottom. You might want to start from here, maybe go that way and come back again, or here and come back again, because this is really thick and it's going to be, you know, depends on your materials, right? I mean, if I was using fabric, I could fold this and press it and crush it and have no problem at all. But depending on your materials, some are going to be fatter than other ones. And so just do it so that this is flat from here to here. And this is where the fold is. Doesn't even matter what size the folds are, because, you know, it's going to be fun trying to fold it for some of these materials that we're using. So now I'm just going to go here and back again. And that wasn't too painful after all. Did you notice 2 rows of stitching? And I didn't go right to the edge. I just went to here and up there and back again. So that should hold it. This is not a big utility pocket anyway. It's, I think a cell phone might fit in there, or some keys. Anyway, let's put this on. It doesn't matter where your magnet lands. So I'm not going to do the magnet up, because if you do the magnet up, it overhangs. What I'm going to do, now it doesn't want to let go. What I'm going to do is do it right along the edge and make sure this space here and this space here is exactly the same. And I'm just going to baste it along the top, because it will hold better when we put the lining on the slip pocket, when we have to sew that on. So I will take some measurements and make sure that this is good where it goes, but I'm just going to baste it across the top. All right, now we can put the snap on. This is our lining for this. And I've got my markings in there. Just going to poke some holes. And then we sew this on top of this. And then after we flip it over, it'll be the lining inside. So I'm just going to sew across the top here. There, so I've sewed these 2 pieces together, the lining and this, and I flipped it over, and I've kind of finger pressed it down as best as I can. Under here, you might want to put some double-sided tape inside here to hold this down, because you can't really clip it very well, but that's up to you. I also put some clips at the end here so that I can try and keep it all flat as I top stitch right through here on my slip pocket on the black. We're leaving the flap out of this. So you can see here I did my top stitching, and then this comes over and closes like that. And we can put this aside for a minute, because I'm going to clip that here anyway, because I want it to go flat. So maybe it'll learn to go flat while I'm busy with other things. That's better. Learn to go flat. So that'll learn to go flat here. I had this silver pen, which works really good on this side, and it sort of comes off, but I don't know if it quite comes off, because I can still see it. And then I couldn't see it. It did come off, so I made the marks in this vinyl by poking holes in. Hopefully it's good. Let's just test this here. Oops, it grabbed on already. I know I grabbed on, but pulled it out. Because I would like to know before I finish if these holes are good. Let's see if I can get that again. Just a little test. Yeah, that'll be okay. I have moved holes before, and it wasn't bad. I ended up gluing some interfacing on the holes and putting new holes in, and it worked out okay. But anyway, these match up pretty good. Now I can't get it to let go. You will sit you there, and we'll continue with this. So this is the front of my bag, and this is the slip pocket that goes on the front of my bag. And let's sew the two together. Let's match up the bottoms here. You know what I'm going to do before I do that? I'm going to sew around this because I don't want these slipping and sliding when I'm trying to sew them to the front. And then I'm going to baste this on here. And then after we can put this aside and go to our next piece. All right, I basted the slip pocket lining and exterior together, and then I placed it on top of here. This is my front of my bag. I basted it onto here and sewed it on just with the basting, right? I also checked this distance was equal to this distance. And this is going to be the back of our bag. I didn't cut the hole out yet. We're going to have a zipper overlay pocket on here. I haven't put my interfacing on my linings yet. All right, we have done this before. Let's do another overlay. You know, with bags, you usually finish off the front. Now we're going to finish off the back, and then we'll finish off the insides. I have marked on here with chalk where I'm supposed to put this, and I'm certainly hoping that I can see it and get it placed properly, and then I can get the chalk off afterwards. That is technically, I guess, where it's supposed to be, but I'm going to go measure it with my ruler in the other room, and we sew around the outside. All right, I've got my zipper overlay sewed on, and I cut it out. And now I can do my pockets that go on here. The first one we just sew on this way. There. So I'm going to sew this down, and then I'll flip it up, and I'll put the right sides together and sew it on here too. Make sure they match up on the sides, because sometimes your zipper is a bit bigger. So don't just follow where your zipper is. Make sure the sides match. And then after it's sewed on, these will be right side together. That's upside down. These are wrong sides, and that's right side up. So I'm just going to sew this down, and then I'll press it and edge stitch it. All right, I sewed the zipper on both pieces, and I did the edge stitching, and I put some double-sided tape on so it's really sticky now. And we're going to center this nicely here. When we sew, I'm probably going to have to move this zipper pull back and forth. And after we get it centered, we're just going to sew inside the box. All right, I've got the inside of the box sewn now. Flipped it over, push this side down so they match, and cut the extra off. And now I just sew around here, but I'm going to do it this way so that I can see what I'm doing. And we don't want to sew our back into our zipper pocket here. Our back is finished. We have a pocket, and our front is finished. Now we have to do the inside back, and the inside back has another one of these on it. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to put a zipper pocket in our inside back. Alrighty, we've done this before. So what we're going to do is edge stitch this onto here around the outside, cut out the opening, and then we're going to sew, this one looks a bit better, sew this on that way, then fold it up, and then sew it on this way, so that we end up with right sides together and the wrong side of the zipper facing up. So I will sew this on and the zipper and then show you just to check. But you know, you could always go back to the more detailed video and follow step by step from that. All right, just to catch up, I sewed the outside and then I clipped a bit out of the inside so I have a zipper box. And I sewed these right side together with the zipper down. And now we turn the zipper up and I place this over here. I'm going to get some double-sided tape to help hold it down. But, you know, you get my point from the other video section on what I did in great detail. So I'm not going to repeat the whole thing here. But make sure this is nicely lined up, and we'll sew along the inside now. And then after the inside sewed, we're going to match up these two and trim a bit off and just sew only the pocket linings together. So I'm going to get that part done and then I'll come back and show you again. So there you go. We have it finished. There's a real pocket inside. First I did the outsides, right? And then I sewed these on. And then I sewed the inside. And then I closed these. So this side is done. Now in the pattern it suggests that if you want pockets like this on both, this is going to be my back and my front, you can. I, just to show you, am going to put a slip pocket on this side, because of course if you want not to do these zippers, you can do slip pockets on both sides. So it's up to you. Now the one thing I do like to have, since this is the back, is I like to have my label on here. So I'm just going to measure where the center is now that I know where the zipper lands, and I'm going to put my label on there. And so that's one thing, label. And the other thing is I'm going to sew these two layers of the pocket together. But I'm going to leave it open here at the bottom so I can turn it. And then I'll poke the corners out. And I don't know if I can press this or not, because I have pressed this before, but I'm not sure about this. But we'll talk about that more later. So right now I'm going to put the label on and I'm going to sew these two layers together, leaving this opening here. Now when it comes to the corners, you might want to take some snips out of it as you're turning it, because it's easier to make a proper curve or corner if you've got these snipped. So I'm just going to do some snips in here. You can even cut this down a little bit, but I like to leave something for my machine to hold on to. And this isn't a very big seam allowance anyway. And then we just turn it out. I'm going to go see if I can press it a little bit, or even clip it down so it stays while I sew. And then what I'm going to do is sew that shut too. I've got this placed on just with double-sided tape. So now I have to sew it around. So I'm going to sew this on, and then this side will be done. This side is already done for the back. So my pocket's on. So all my sides and everything are done. Let's do the top now, where the recessed zipper is. And I'm just going to put on my zipper now on the pull. So this end gets bent, and this end gets the zipper end on it. If you have a manufactured hardware one, you can put that on. I usually fold it and glue it and shove it in and glue it. And then the last thing is to put the screw through that they have. I'm going to put an actual vinyl zipper tab on here. And then on this end, I'm going to bend these and sew them down. Usually try and keep them both the same length, right? So don't go too wild with them. Right about there. Make sure they look the same again. And just a couple of stitches will hold them. And the end just goes on like this. I might use some double-sided tape to hold it down. And then we fold it up. And we sew it on. You don't have to sew through the zipper, but it is good to just sew the tape itself. Now, this one is a little bit not quite the same width as my tape, and I like to have them exactly the same. So I'm going to trim this down on the sides here so that these look the same before I sew them, because this tape is a different width than the other one I used, I guess. So I make the width the size of my zipper tape. Then I just sew a little box or a U around, and I try to stay off the zipper. So I'm not too sure if you can see this, but you can see I just sewed this way, one stitch over and down, and here one over and down. And I did that because I didn't want to go across my zipper. On the other side, I put a ton of glue because I don't want any of the stitches to fall out. But I think that looks pretty good. This I sewed down too. I started from here and went up and back down again. And this is all going to be hidden inside your zipper facing, so nobody will see it. So this is done. I'm going to go get the zipper facings and do that now. And by that time, this will have dried out. All right, we've got our linings for a zipper. We've got our exterior for a zipper. And we've got our zipper ready. These are supposed to sit on top. And these ones sit underneath. The only thing you can see with this one is that it is much, 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 much bigger. So we have to hem these up. I'm just going to sew this one and this one down with the seam allowance mentioned in the pattern. And then I'm going to do the same on this one too. And then after, it'll be ready to stick on the zipper. Alrighty, these are hemmed. And they look pretty much the same as this, which is good. And if you are using all raw edge material, you don't need to hem these. You keep them just the same size as the exterior ones. Now we've got our zipper ready, and we're going to open it up. And it's right side up. And I like to put this outer edge here up against this and leave about 1/4 of an inch at the top. I'll measure it properly off camera, but I'm just going to clip it together just so you can see what it's supposed to look like, because we want this to be sewn on here with the seam allowance mentioned in the pattern. And it looks pretty goofy this way, but I know that's not 1/4 of an inch hanging over on the top, but I want to get this together. There. So we're going to sew here after I check that distance. And then after, we're going to open it up. And if you can press it, go press it so that it's sitting like this. It'll be a nice edge on the other side. All right, so we sewed it on. So you'll notice I'm about 1/4 of an inch down here. Got a big, huge, fat thread hanging off there. And it's about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here, but it depends on your zipper foot, how wide your tape is, you know, how close you can get into here or to this side, you know, so it's not crucial because it depends on the equipment you're using. But this is sewn on now, and I'd like to check it before I go any farther. So if we end up zipping it up, that's going to be even. And this is going to be even. So your two facings are going to look the same. Okay? Now I'm going to go over and press it, because I can, and get it to stay down. If you can't press it, you might want to use double-sided tape or something to get it to stick down just while you sew it. The next step that we're going to do is put on our other piece. And our other piece will line up here like this, and here, and then it'll follow along down. Of course, it's not pressed, so it's kind of bumpy down here. And I'm going to check the length of these because I think I've got some overhang here. Tell you the one thing I really wished I used was the labels, because I've got so many rectangle pieces here, I can't remember what's what. So this is how this is going to go together. So I'm going to press my bottom piece, and I'm going to sew all around this rectangle. And that'll hold the zipper down, and it'll attach these two pieces together. All right, I pressed the lining. That really helps. And this zipper is so cool. I want to have as much showing as possible. So I'm happy it turned out with a very narrow margin here. I put down double-sided tape right along here, and that's where I'm going to be sewing, but my machine likes it. So you have to be careful with that. You might have to put your double-sided tape somewhere else. So right now we're going to sew right on top of this black exterior piece. Edge stitch it around so that it holds everything together. This layer, the zipper, edge, and the facing inside layer. So I'm going to sew around, and then after we can trim off the pieces here on the end after we see what they are exactly. All right, we've got it sewed together. I marked my centers on here. And I'm just going to trim this off because we want to be able to see where the edge is. So that's our piece done. Here's the centers. And next we're going to match them up with the centers on here, because this gets between these two pieces. And keep in mind too, you know, do you want your pull to go this way or that way? This is the front of my bag. I want my pull on my side here, so I'm going to put it this way. I don't have a center marked on here, so I'm going to get my center marked, but I'm just going to show you right now where you're going to sew it on. That's approximately center. So we're going to sew it down this side and turn it up. And that looks pretty good. And then we're going to sew it down this side, centered, which I don't have the center marked. And we're going to sew it down here. Now, if it's easier for you to sew it with the zipper open, you can definitely do that because it doesn't affect anything, right? But I just had it for you to show this is the end result. So we have to sew this and this. I might not sew past here because you don't want too many holes in your bag to start with. We'll get holes there later, right? So let's just sew only where the facing is and sew the facing on, but make sure it's centered. Okay, I've got it sewed on, and I only sewed it right where the zipper facing is. So this is good, except for the fact I have to round the corners. And there's a little bag template corner in the pattern. And you can print that off. Or you could do any kind of corner you want, because really, if all the corners are the same, it'll work. It doesn't matter what method you use. I do this one on this side, and I'll draw it, trace it, and then I flip it over to do the other side. And I'll draw and trace it. And before I cut, I'll show you on this one. I've drawn it here, and before I cut, I put the two together and find the center, and I cut one and make sure it lines up with the lines of the other one. This one's already finished. So on this one, I will cut one and put it together and make sure it lines up with the lines on the other one, just in case. Yep, that's good. And there's a little center mark, and I can just cut this one now, because it's more important that you do them all exactly the same than anything else. All right, so I've got all my pieces. This is going to be my base. And of course, with my base, I want a piece of Peltex that's a bit smaller all around. That's probably about 1/2 inch all around. It might fit, it might not. We shall see. Lots of wing in it here. I've got my other outside pieces. I'm going to put the sides here so that I can sew them. And here's another side. I love this embossed vinyl. This one's not too heavy either. It's easy to sew. We shall see when I get all the layers together, but for now it's been easy to sew. So this seam and this seam get sewed, and I'm going to sneak this in between the two seams. See, it might be too long, but then I'm going to fold the seam up and top stitch it down to hold this tight in here. This will reinforce our base. So first of all, I'm going to sew these two seams, and then on our lining, we've got these two seams. And if I'm going to make the seams on the outside face in so that I can trap this in there, then I want these ones to face out so that when we eventually put it together, the seams will be like the thickness will be feathered one way for the inside and one way for the outside. So right now I'm just going to sew these here and then top stitch them down. And remember to top stitch them so that it's this way and that way. It shows it on the pattern too. So we'll top stitch them down that way. And we'll top these ones down this way because we're going to trap that inside there. All right. I sewed the seam. I pressed the lining one to the outside and I top stitched it. And on this one I sewed the seam, and I'm going to press the lining to the inside and clip it down. But first I want to slide this in here and see if it fits in between these two seams. I think I'm a smidge off. So I'm just going to bend this over because I want this to be caught in my sewing underneath. So yes, I'm going to take a bit off. Now let's see if it fits under here, because I want it under this one and clip down so that I can top stitch it down. The other thing you could do is put glue in it too. Sometimes I do that if I don't have a side seam. And I glue this down. So you could do that too. Let's make sure it's straight though. And put it down on this side. And when you top stitch, make sure you catch. If you don't catch, then you will have to use some glue to get it to stay. And then that way it's going to be sort of top stitched here. and it's going to be sort of strong, probably stronger than if you had nothing. If you want to use something heavier, go right ahead, but you might not be able to sew through it, and you might have to glue it down to get it to stay. Or you could use 2 layers. You know, it's up to you, but I just want something a little bit stiff inside here for my base. So I'm going to top stitch this side down now, and then after we can sew our gussets onto our bag pieces. Alrighty, so we've got the lining one done for sure. I think I showed you that. This is how I made sure that my heavyweight stabilizer didn't slip out. But of course, if you're using something that you can't sew through, you'll have to glue it down or something like that. You can use heavyweight stabilizer in the sides too, but I don't want to make it too heavy just in case it interferes with turning it. When I turn it, I try and keep this not wrinkled or bent very much. I turn the lining a lot, but we'll see when the time comes. But you can, if you want, glue some heavyweight stabilizer onto here. So I'm going to put this aside for now because right now I want to work on, oh, and don't forget to make sure your centers are marked on everything, because right now I want to work on attaching the gusset. So I've got my lining pieces here. They've got the centers marked too. And I'm going to start with the lining so I don't have to change my foot back and forth on my machine, because I'll probably need a walking foot or something for my exterior. So let's just go with this to start with. Now we do need to have little clips cut into the corners. I'll probably start about here, and I'll probably, don't make them too far. Now, these are longer. I like them longer because it makes me feel better when I'm easing around the corners to know that I've got lots of gusset to work with. So I'm just going to pin these down. I feel a zipper pull underneath there, so make sure when you're sewing everything is out of the way. What have I got trapped underneath there? Oh, it's a zipper in the back. I might even cut that zipper down a little bit because I don't want it getting caught when I sew. And when I do sew, I'm going to have this flat on the bed of the sewing machine, so I wouldn't really know that that zipper's there. So I can cut this end off. So a little bit of clipping, not too much, or else you're going to have to make your seam allowances wider to be able to hide the clipping. And just out of curiosity, make sure you don't have like 5 inches on one side and 2 inches on the other side. It's an exaggeration, but we want it to be sort of close because otherwise you're pulling too much. So I have it here. I'm going to sew it. I'm going to start sewing from here. I'll backspace to secure it and go up. And same here, I'll backspace to secure it and go up. And then after I get that on, then I'm going to move on. Oh, that's looking nice. Then I'm going to do the exact same thing with this side and go around. But I'll talk about that when we get to it. And another thing I'm going to mention here is, well, you can't see it. I'm going to stop sewing about there, okay? Because I want this to be a 1/2 inch seam allowance and then tapering down to the 3/8 at the top. So the mouth of the bag will be the same on the exterior and the lining, but on the lining, this will be in the body of it a bit tighter. Okay, so I'm going to change, you know, not necessarily stop, but you know what I mean. I'm going to sew here and then start sewing, tapering down to 3/8 from 1/2 inch here. So just keep that in mind too, that you can, just as long as the mouth of your bag is exactly the same, you can make the body of your bag a little bit tighter. All right, one side sewed on. Now let's get the other side sewed on, and you'll notice this is really fat, but that's really skinny. make sure that the top is the right seam allowance so that your mouth of your lining fits your mouth of your exterior. So let's stick this on now. Now I'm just checking here to make sure it's nice and even. So let's put this one on now. All right, so I'm going to sew around again, starting from the bottom and going up. Let's just check this is lined up nicely. We have our seams. I gotta be careful, there's pins in here. Yep, that works pretty good. And after I'm going to zigzag because this is fabric, and I'm going to sew a double row stitching around the corners too because I want to make sure that nothing pops. All right, oops, thread everywhere. With all this reinforcing here that I've done, this is the point where you find out you sewed something together wrong, but I'm liking the look of it. It's okay. So I can trim these off now because these are a bit bigger than we need. So I'll trim those off. And then after that, we can fold down the top edge and hem it according to the seam allowances that are in the pattern. The other thing we can do too is get a piece of foam and try and add some more support in. And I'd put the foam in just the same as I did with the base. I'd make it smaller, the size of this, and then I'd push these over top of it and just stick a little slip stitch on the sides. You don't have to attach it all the way around perfectly because it's just gonna, you know, it's foam. It's gonna hold up this floppy bit here. Okay, I put my foam on. See, it's just a slip stitch around. It doesn't have to be tight because after all, oh, I just popped my knot. I'll have to retie my knot. It doesn't have to be tight because after all, we want to be able to put things in the pocket, right? So, but it stands up nice. These sides aren't flapping too much. Now we shall go on to putting the base on our outside pieces. I've got my centers marked. And I've got my centers marked here. And we're going to do them in the exact same way. I'm just going to start down here and find where we start curving up. Okay, I've got it sewed on one side, the back. Check your seam allowances are uniform all the way around. And I did a double stitch here, a double row, to protect my corners on both corners. And I ran my finger along the inside too and looked just to make sure there weren't too many bumpies in there, but it seems to be lying flat. So now we can turn this one over and do the other side. All right, now we've got that sewn. I forgot to open my zipper, so I had to poke my fingers in there and get it open, but it wasn't that difficult. Let's turn it around carefully so that we don't pull these seam allowances that we just did. So again, we are trimming off the extra. I'm just going to draw a line across there so that I can see where I'm trimming. All right, they're trimmed. Now let's get our hem here. Now if we have the seams pointing to the outside on the lining, we should point them to the inside here. Now we can stagger them. So you can right now go along this edge here and either edge stitch or top stitch it so that it stays down nicely. Remember, these are always going to face up. We're never going to have them in any seams from now on. And same with this, don't sew this in anywhere. So we can go around here and sew this down. Or else you can wait and put your bag inside. You can line up your centers, and the foam is out of the way because I cut it shorter. And you can use some double-sided tape or something to attach it. But when we sew around, we can sew on the lining too. It's your choice. Do you want to just sew this only and then put in the lining? Or do you want to put this in and sew the lining and that layer at the same time? So it's up to you. I don't know what your machine can do. This doesn't feel too thick for me, but I'm going to use a lot of double-sided tape to hold this down because I don't want to fall off. My stitch to fall off so that I'm not even sewing the lining. I want the lining to sit. If I was using fabric, I could just stick pins through, right? But I don't want to ruin my vinyl and I can't clip it. So I'm going to use some double-sided tape to hold this down as I sew across here. And if you want, you can do it in sections too, because sometimes if you just sew one section at a time, you know, and concentrate on that one section, it ends up being neater. So it's your choice. Just make sure you line up your centers and your seam allowances. And we'll sew these two pieces together. Have I got my backs and my backs? No, I put my back with my front. Let's put my back with my back. That's this way, because there's my zipper here and my zipper here. And this pocket on the front with this pocket on the front. And just to show you, it is possible. I pinned the fabric to the lining fabric here, and I clipped the fabric to the vinyl here. So now I can go sew around and get my lining attached to my bag. Alrighty. I don't think there's very much left to do. Our bag is finished. Next, we have to do the strap anchors. So I'll put that aside for a minute. Now I made a point of putting, this is glued on. This is heavyweight interfacing glued on because this is so soft. It's not going to help much holding. And these little things get folded onto here. They barely fit. If I had gate rings, that would give me a lot more room. But it sure makes a nice look. And I've also marked where I want to put my rivets. So right now I'm going to put holes in here. Make sure my D-ring is on there. Put one rivet there to hold the D-ring on. And then after we put this on here, and with the holes that have been made, we can mark where we need our rivet holes on our bag. And they have to go all the way through to the other side so that we can put a rivet right through. Okay. Now, if you are using a material, like if I used this red for the whole bag, I would want to reinforce it. So if you think you need reinforcing, just use the bottom of the strap anchor and attach it here with your rivet when you stick it all through. And it helps if you glue it on there because it'll reinforce that floppy red material. But if you think this is strong enough, you don't have to use that. But just keep in mind, you can cut an extra piece and stick it on with some glue, punch the holes through, and then put this on top. So for now, let's get these sorted out, and then after we can move on to the next step. All right, that seems to be sitting good, so I'm going to go find my pliers and squish it. Squish these four. This one's already been squished. And then after, I'll do the other side. Just the same way. I'll mark the holes, I'll punch the holes, and I'll place the rivets. All right, we've got the side anchors on here. So now's the time for us to make the strap, because once that's done, it's done. Now you might notice in the pattern I've got a piece that is 1 inch wide or 1.5 inch wide, and that I use to make the strap end here. Now of course this is a flimsy material, so I would like to have it reinforced with something that's a bit skinnier, just so that it holds it. And you could put this on with sewing or a rivet, and I just put my strap in that way, my 1 inch strap. If you have webbing, you know, you can do that. There's lots of ways to do it. If this is strong enough on its own with some heavyweight interfacing, you can just use the cork only, right? And put rivets in, and that would be your strap end. But it's up to you. And so I don't have 1 inch wide stuff. I have 1.5 inch wide, so I've cut a couple of pieces here to help myself. And also I do not have a 1.5 inch wide slider. So what I am going to do is just use, I'll reinforce this still. I'm just going to use I'm just going to use these strap swivel hooks and my webbing. And I can put rivets in to hold that, or I can sew it. It's, you know, just up to what I feel like doing. I've cut this so that it's 45 inches long. Plus, if you want to do it this way, there's a 2 inch overhang. And then put the rivets in here. So there's lots of options on how you can do this. Did I do it 2 inches? Yes, I did. What I am going to do is cut a little snip of this off here and sew it down so that it covers up that spot. Just make a little patch. So these will be my 2 little patches. This webbing is really strong, so I don't need this. Everything depends on what kind of materials you use. So let's make sure that, yes. So I can sew this on now. So there you go, strap all done. No slider because I don't have a 1.5 inch one, but I really badly wanted to use this webbing because it matched the zipper. So, and actually I don't know, I think I prefer the side with the black facing out. Anyway, we shall put this on. And we're finished. So how'd that go? Make sure you post your bag because I certainly want to see your Kata bag. I've got links for Facebook and for Instagram down there, so I'd love to see what you're making. So thank you for watching, and happy sewing.